Welcome to the Battle of the Khans. Discussing the power level of various Mortal Kombat characters, especially heavy hitters and endgame bosses, is something that's done pretty often. Badly, because power levels in this franchise are kind of a joke. There's no consistency at all. But one thing that isn't talked about or appreciated nearly to the same degree is ruling. Partly because it's less sexy, and partly because there aren't that many rulers to speak of, and we don't have a lot of info on most of them. But I'd argue it's actually a very sexy topic, because when you think about it, it's not just the literal power level of the individual that causes entire realms and nations to bend to these apex creatures, but also their ability to both acquire and maintain rule and governance over their domain. In fact, it has way more to do with the latter than the former, as one of these three will prove in a bit. So what I'd like to do in this video is go through each of the rulers of the toughest, most war-driven realm in particular, their strengths, their weaknesses, and see if we can figure out who's the greatest ruler of Outworld. Oh, and by the way, this list will not include Melina Khan because she ruled for a full 2 seconds off screen in MKX before getting ousted, and we never really got to see what her rule was like before she did. Also, I haven't played MK1 yet. Starting out in chronological order with the OG ruler, the Dragon King himself, Onaga. Now, there isn't a tremendous amount of info on Onaga, so we're gonna have to infer some stuff about him, but what we do know is that A, he was again the original ruler of Outworld long before Shao Kahn's reign. B, he's one of the most powerful beings in the entire Mortal Kombat mythos. And C, he had the ability to resurrect the dead en masse, which led to his legendary army being known as undefeatable back in the day. So right off the bat, we have qualities that would make any conqueror jealous to their core, and the mere fact that most beings, including Shao Kahn, would get violated to pieces in a one-on-one fight with the Dragon King in itself builds a strong case for Onaga, since raw strength is the most immediate factor that determines your ability to procure and attain power. In other words, to attain power, you must be powerful. One of life's many catch-22 predicaments. Now, it's never been fully clear to me exactly what Onaga is. Back when I first played Deception, I thought he was just a dude that possessed Reptile's body. Basically a schmo that got resurrected via a dragon egg, who then transferred his soul along with the dragon's essence into Reptile, and it's all very confusing. And that's why he has reptilian and dragon-like features, but apparently no, his species is just listed as dragon. But not the regular kind of dragon that we see in MK, those are different kinds of dragons, or the frost drakes from Sub-Zero's MKX ending, or the other type of Eastern-inspired dragons that the Elder Gods are alluded to being, all of whom look nothing like Prince Goro and the other Shao Kahn, who are allegedly half-dragon, yet the games make no attempt to distinguish between or classify these various subsets of draconids, so we'll just go with a dragon, especially since his name likely translates to Great Dragon or King Dragon, surprise surprise, from the Japanese language. Much like Shao Kahn, who succeeded him, Onaga was a warlord at heart who likely undertook many campaigns of conquest. His armies never lost a battle because of his innate ability to resurrect the dead in great numbers with ease. As a side note, I really like the flavor of this mythology they created here. By the time we get to see Outworld, it's more or less a barren wasteland devoid of life, but that holds many architectural clues as to what this realm looked like before. We know that Shao Kahn sapped the land of its life. Between that, a Chinese-inspired terracotta-like army, and a Dragon King, Outworld is clearly meant to have this Asian Empire gone wrong vibe to it. One can only wonder how grand this place was back during Onaga's reign. So anyway, conventionally, the Dragon King is by far the strongest of the three rulers. He also had a taste for conquering and strengthening his empire, yet based on the history that we know, his conquests never steered him too far outside of his realm, since the Elder Gods never seem to have had to intervene to stop him. In fact, the Mortal Kombat tournament seems to have been instated during Shao Kahn's reign to stop him from conquering major realms like Edenia. So despite his might, Onaga seems to have understood the value of restraint as well, painting him as a pretty well-rounded, if still a bit ruthless, ruler. And his restraint segues nicely to his major flaw as a ruler, namely the fact that he was a little bit too concerned with himself. His original quest back in the day was to achieve true immortality, the magnificent, nigh unbeatable ruler of god power level wanted more power. His lofty goal of immortality is, again, a nice parallel to the dynastic emperors of old like Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China who was obsessed with finding a so-called elixir of life that supposedly gave the gift of immortality to whomever drank it. Onaga wanted to make sure his rule would last forever, and in a cruel twist of irony, that obsession led to his demise. Shao Kahn is a man who needs no introduction. He has become one of the most recognizable names and faces of this franchise, which is a testament to his popularity as a character. Our second ruler on the list, Shao was initially an advisor to Onaga. Ambitious as he was patient, Shao knew he couldn't take on the Dragon King in a straight fight, and any attempt at a rebellion would be squashed by his army. So he played the long game, rising through the ranks and becoming Onaga's most trusted confidant, and then played a hand that even a dragon would fold to. He poisoned the Dragon King, taking advantage of his preoccupation with immortality, and let the venom do what an entire army could not. He killed Onaga and took his throne, becoming the new emperor and Khan of Outworld. After his death, his legendary army committed mass ritual sacrifice, which tells us that Onaga managed to inspire a fanatical degree of loyalty in his followers, if they were willing to take their own lives in grief over their master's demise. Shao Kahn was inspired by real-world figures such as Genghis Khan, for obvious reasons, and his rule was as brutal as it was efficient. He drained Outworld of its life force, killing most of its vegetation and turning the realm into a wasteland. This seems needlessly dramatic, but it's a very effective, albeit cruel, tactic to make people more dependent on you. When you reduce the number of resources people have at their disposal, they become more desperate, driven, and willing to do what you ask of them to gain your favor and stay alive. Of course, it also incites people to rebel against you, but Shao was an expert at squashing every single such attempt. He knew exactly what he wanted: to turn Outworld into a machine of war, one that would be skilled, efficient, and desperate enough to take on more powerful realms. This next part we know all too well. He reigned as a brutally efficient tyrant that brought both Outworld and many other realms to heel. His ambitions surpassed even those of the Dragon King, as he set out to conquer realm after realm and merge them with Outworld. His empire grew so powerful and posed such a threat to the other realms that the Elder Gods themselves had to intervene and try to police him and slow down his relentless campaign. His prowess as a battle commander and strategist was proven when he conquered Edenia, a realm populated by near immortal warriors that benefited from thousands of years of training, a natural aptitude for magic, and a world full of natural resources. Shao Kahn crushed Edenia, merging it with Outworld, and this is after Outworld won 10 straight Mortal Kombat tournaments against Edenia's finest. Shao Kahn had many enemies, and a great deal of spies, conspirators, and traitors tried to depose him and take his throne.
And they all lie dead.
Which is perhaps the greatest testament to Shao's efficiency as a ruler. Despite ruling with an iron fist and governing very selfishly, he was paranoid enough to thwart every single attempt on his life or his throne. He was no fool, despite how some games might portray him as. He understood the political game. He knew which realms and peoples he could afford to bully, and which ones he needed to sweet-talk, or how to pit his enemies against each other and otherwise lie, cheat, and steal to get what he wanted. That is, of course, until his invasion of Earthrealm, because if there's one flaw that all of these traits inevitably breed, it's hubris. Shao Kahn had grown overconfident and underestimated his enemy's might and deviousness. He also arguably didn't value diplomacy as much as he should have, playing the bully for far too long and breeding one too many enemies that would circle around like vultures ready to pounce at the slightest misstep. Yes, he was good at deflecting, but under these circumstances, defeat is only a matter of time. His defeat at the hands of Earthrealm caused him to lose grip over many of the powers under his control. The Shokan abandoned him, and Edenia became an independent realm once more. But then he also ends up surviving all the way up to Armageddon in the original timeline, and beating absolutely everyone, which starts to seem a bit masturbatory, and a result of this character being perhaps too popular for his own good. But like it or not, it's yet another feat that's consistent with his overall portrayal and showcases his greatest strength, his ability to figure out a way to win against all odds and to follow through, which is somewhat ironic in contrast to his egotistical megalomaniacal exterior, because a person who's too self-centered can't always win, since they'd be more interested about themselves than about doing what's necessary to achieve victory. They would hesitate to sacrifice most of their chess pieces, for instance, because it looks bad or they're not sure about it, yet that's exactly what Shao Kahn will do if necessary. He'll risk it all to achieve victory. That said, sometimes it backfires. And with the bully's inevitable defeat comes a gigantic power vacuum, and filling it is an entirely different type of challenge. Kotal, or Kotal, is a member of the Aztec race and realm, one of many that was annexed to Outworld during Shao Kahn's reign. His people resemble ancient Aztecs, and his character specifically takes heavy inspiration from, oh boy, Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec god of war, sacrifice, and the sun. Kotal is one of the more seamless retcons of the lore, added retroactively as one of Shao Kahn's generals during the events of the first few games, who rose through the ranks and proved to be a reliable asset to the former emperor. So when Shao died, Kotal was one of the obvious candidates to succeed him. Now, right off the bat, I'm gonna both give props and criticize NetherRealm Studios for what they did here. First off, I straight up commend them for creating this character. Trying to figure out what a worthy successor to Shao Kahn would look like is a pretty tall order, and they acquitted themselves with a fair bit of flair and creativity. A towering, exotic-looking god of war who specializes in not one, not two, but three overpowered abilities in the form of blood magic, sun magic, and totems that enhance his already supernatural abilities. You really get the feeling that someone like this could actually go toe-to-toe against Shao Kahn. However, all of that awesomeness is undermined by the big fat dump that the writing team took on him. Kotal Kahn gets bodied by fucking Kung Jin not 2 minutes into MKX's story mode in front of his subjects after being unreasonably harsh with the Earthrealmer gang. Then he effortlessly immobilizes all 4 combat kids, including Kung Jin, like it's nothing, which makes you wonder why he didn't do that during their aforementioned duel, and basically double-crosses the Earthrealm that he claimed to want to maintain healthy relations with, and then decides to become Shinnok's bitch as soon as he hears of his escape. As for MK11, no comment. So I am forced to once again infer what this character was supposed to be conceptually instead of relying solely on the information officially given. And infer we can, because Kotal's main traits are fairly obvious, even if they're made to be mostly liabilities instead of strengths by the story modes. First and foremost, Kotal Kahn is a much more prudent ruler than his predecessors and possesses way more common sense. That doesn't mean he's a stranger to political intrigue and subterfuge as he plots a coup against his immediate predecessor Molina, not exclusively for power's sake, but because Molina's a terrible ruler. She was unpopular with the locals and refused any kind of practical advice, blinded by her hatred of Earthrealm. And the fact that practically her entire retinue jumps ship to support Kotal as soon as the opportunity presents itself speaks volumes on his popularity and potential to be a competent ruler. Properly filling out a power vacuum and stabilizing an entire realm after a brutal defeat is no small task, like I mentioned earlier, and Kotal Kahn took plenty of steps to ensure a smooth transition. He strove to maintain peaceful relations with realms like Edenia that had already broken off from Outworld, and focused on keeping those that were already merged intact, concentrating his efforts on internal affairs and stabilizing the realm rather than expanding it, figuring that a truly unified Outworld would stand strong against any enemy, which is a prudent call considering the level of disarray Shao Kahn left the realm in. He also wisely chose to maintain friendly relations with Earthrealm despite their past conflicts, recognizing that further animosity between the two would eventually lead to the destruction of both. That said, Kotal was no spring chicken either. He knew exactly how hard-boiled and militarized the people he governed were, so he kept many of the realm's more brutal traditions and enforced order pretty strictly, killing many Tarkatans indiscriminately for their alliance with the rebel Molina, and apparently maiming Goro, which strained relations with the Shao Kahn for a while. Ultimately, though, he managed to unite the disparate peoples of Outworld, not with brute force, but a fair amount of diplomacy, a rare skill in such such a war-driven realm. His weaknesses as a ruler, though heavily exaggerated in the story mode, are the underside of all this. For all of his faults, Shao Kahn knew how to whip the crowd into shape. There was always a realm to conquer, a people to enslave, a tournament to win. He was a good hype man, basically. He always gave his tough subjects a goal to strive towards. The trouble with Kotal Kahn is he focused too much on internal politics and trying to keep everyone happy, and when you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. Of course, him having to deal with a rebellion is a pretty mitigating factor to all of this, but long-term, status quo is not a good place to be for a country or an empire. This is perhaps most egregiously highlighted during his last scene in MKX, where his first instinct after hearing of Shinnok's return was to try to preserve Outworld at all costs. Although every other option was way riskier, every other option would have ultimately been better, because obedience and defensiveness inevitably lead to your country eventually being absorbed by the biggest fish around. Going on the offensive, not breaking faith with Earthrealm in their moment of need, forging alliances with other realms, all of these would have arguably been better strategies. So Kotal has many qualities that a great ruler should possess, but lacks the sometimes necessary impulse for radical action and ends up being a bit overconcerned with the status quo. Basically, he's the Obama to Shao Kahn's Trump, if you'll permit the loosest of analogies. Kotal's a fairer ruler and more popular with the people, but he doesn't do as much as he could, whereas Shao can be brutally efficient sometimes, but he's crazy that way. All of these rulers are a good parallel to the real world and how hard it is to climb and maintain a spot on the top of any given dominance hierarchy, particularly in the business and finance world. It takes a near unscrupulous level of dedication, and any slip-up could lead to your competitors taking your place. So who is the ultimate ruler? Onaga was by far the most powerful, but too distracted to expand far outside of his realm or to notice treachery within it. Shao Kahn was the most cunning, ruthless, and competent, transforming Outworld into the greatest superpower in the MK mythos, yet savaging his people and creating a crap ton of enemies along the way, and Kotal Kahn is the most measured, diplomatic, and common sense oriented of the three rulers, but is somewhat risk-averse and lacks the backbone to make certain hard decisions and stick to the alliances he's forged. It's a close call and a tough thing to judge so simplistically, but ultimately the results speak for themselves. Since he has maintained rule over Outworld for a ridiculous amount of time, annexed many realms to it, quelled every single rebellion and attempt on his throne, maintained his throne without the overwhelming raw power of his predecessor, and was cunning enough to depose said predecessor, I'd say Shao Kahn takes the cake here, like it or not. More importantly, we can glean what the ultimate ruler of Outworld could look like. Powerful but not overstepping his boundaries like Onaga, ruthlessly pragmatic, cunning, and nearly impossible to dethrone like Shao Kahn, but also generous to his subjects and keen on making political alliances with other realms like Kotal Kahn. Let me know in the comments which of these three gets your vote, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want to see more of this stuff. Cheers.